Like you mentioned that either an alliance or a friendship, Russia and China clearly follow the policy of an enemy's enemy is a friend, and obviously the common enemy here is the United States of America. But in this whole scenario and emerging alliance, where does India stand, and what is India's position?
There are multiple ways one can understand that this increasing proximity or partnership of China and Russia can influence India. Very clearly, for example, the more China becomes uncontested and powerful and influential in Eurasia and with Russia, the kind of major concerns India would have. One, at the level of Russia becoming increasingly intertwined with not just China, but another close friend of China, Pakistan. And that would have implications for India because India has been enormously dependent on Russian military equipment for decades, more than half a century. And we still have large amount of military equipment which requires spare parts from Russia. And in that sense, Russia becoming increasingly under influence of China would have influence on how India would then not just sustain its defense cooperation with Russia, but also withstand increasing pressures from China. Second, of course, if China becomes far more influential, it clearly means that India will also have to really working hard to make sure that its increasing visibility and influence is sustained, and it doesn't end up by sort of reaching a stage where it has to choose between United States and China, which could emerge as two poles in international sort of relations. And in that sense, I think India has clearly to worry about Russia becoming increasingly dependent on China and China becoming increasingly influential, and the contestation becoming simply between China and the United States and India being pushed to choosing sides.
Now, talking more about India's position at the moment. Now, India has had long-standing relations with Russia, and it does look like that Moscow will not sacrifice its relations with India to please China. While on the other hand, it does seem like Moscow will not also back India when it comes to India's policy against China. So, do you think that with the growing Russia-China axis, New Delhi's relations with Moscow will be affected in the future?
There is no doubt that Ukraine crisis has impacted on India's relations with Russia. The West is also going to interpret Japanese Prime Minister's visit to Ukraine from India in one way, and Russia is going to interpret that in another way. And in that sense, every next day makes India do and say things which are open to interpretations by both sides. One on the side of Russia and China, and on the other side, United States and its European and Asian allies. So it's tightening the maneuvering space for India in that sense as to how India can contribute to pursuing its own interests and also influencing the mitigation and outcome of Ukraine conflict.
Right, New Delhi has so far taken a very neutral stance. It has abstained even at the UNGA meet. But we're also witnessing how the world is slowly getting divided with the West and NATO on one side and the anti-West alliance on the other. For how long do you think will India be able to maintain its neutral stance?
It's becoming increasingly tough challenge. And if you look at simple semantics of India's approach to Ukraine, which we largely call proactive neutrality, India has gradually moved from, we started by saying India wants to express its concern. Then we said we regret what is happening in Ukraine. Then we said we deplore. Then we said India wants to make sure the world understands and respects international law. Everybody should respect the United Nations Charter. Then India went ahead and said that national sovereignty and territorial integrity should be protected. India then went ahead and said that the kind of massacre that happened in Bucha should be investigated by independent agencies at global level. India actually voted against the Russian proposal later in August 2021, 2022, when Russia was wanting President Zelensky not to address online the United Nations General Security Council. So India has constantly been let's say, firming up and sharpening its responses. And now Prime Minister Kishida's visit to Ukraine from India, again, it will be understood, as I said, in different ways by both sides. So as Ukraine war lingers on and continues as long as it has, India's maneuverability then, faces increasing challenges to maintain that balance between two sides that India has sought to maintain so far.
Right, Professor. Like you mentioned, that India has sharpened its responses while also maintaining a neutral stance. Thank you for joining us on WION and sharing your insights with us on this. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all